Hey everyone, welcome to this video. Today I'm going to be looking at another plugin from the company called Dehancer. If you're not familiar with them, Dehancer is a company that creates plugins for video and photo software to help you recreate the film look easily and accurately. They're really special in the way they've designed their software, and it does a really great job. So if you follow my channel, I did a review of the plugin for DaVinci Resolve, the video side of things. They also make one for Premiere Pro and other apps, so I'll leave the links below. But on the photo side, today we're going to be looking at the Lightroom Classic, and with that plugin can also work with Photoshop, Capture One, and I think Affinity Photo. Oh, again, I'll leave all the links down the bottom so you can have a look for your specific requirements, etc. And without talking too much, I'll flip over the camera to the computer side and I'll just do a walk through the plugin and show you some of the things it does. It's really awesome, so I hope you stick around, and yeah, I'll flip the camera now. See you there. I've got the plugin already installed. I won't go through the installation. It's fairly simple, and there is a manual available for how to do it. But once it's installed, there's a few settings to check just in terms of color settings on the monitor that you're using and in Lightroom itself. So first of all, I'm on a Mac, so just the Apple icon, system preferences, and then display. I've got auto brightness taken off and true tone taken off, just so that I've got more control of the monitor, and I've got my color profile set to sRGB. On the Mac, you can also use the Internet and Web sRGB reference if you've got that down in the drop-down list. And once that's done, we need to check the settings in Lightroom, and if you were using Photoshop or Capture One, etc., you would check those settings as well. So in Lightroom, just need to go to Lightroom and then Preferences, and then External Editing up the top here, and we just need to make sure that TIFF, sRGB and 16 bits is selected here, and also down here, as well as that Dehancer should be now installed after the installation takes place. It should be in here under application. So once that's sorted out, we can have a look at the plugin. So I've got a couple of photos down here. I might just click on this last one to start off with because it's quite colorful. So one other thing that we need to sort of think about is how the raw file has been processed when it's in Lightroom. And Dehancer recommends a couple of settings be changed down here, just so that the file that goes into the Dehancer plugin is as good as it can be for the film profiles to look as natural as possible. So a couple of changes, really quick ones, just in terms of profile. Usually when I open Lightroom Classic on just the standard profiles color, they recommend to change that to standard. I think it just makes it a little bit flatter. And then there's a couple of settings here. They're recommending the exposure to go down to -1, the contrast to minus 40, minus 40. I could probably just type those in. And then the blacks up to +60. So I think we're just working on that dynamic range, making it ready to be processed in Dehancer. And a couple of other settings which for me I don't need to change, but I'll just run through them. The curve should be set to linear down here. Sharpening to 0, noise reduction to 0, color space should be sRGB as we've chose, and the bit depth 16, which we've done as well. And now we are ready. I've done no other processing here other than just making sure that white balance is correct. And we'll go through to opening it in Dehancer. So all you need to do is just right click on the photo, edit in, and then pick Dehancer, and that will launch Dehancer. Just here is an option to choose how you want to edit. I'm just going to edit a copy so that it makes a separate file and doesn't affect the one that's in here. So edit. And here we are. So this is the Dehancer photo version 2.1.0, just for those that are curious in future when you're watching this video. And it's a pretty easy, simple setup. As you can see, I'll just run through the options here. So you've got your different film profiles here and a preset box, so you can just switch between those. These are to make presets. You can save your favorites and just recall them. And in terms of the film stocks, you've got, you know, a little heart here to favorite your favorite ones, your reset tool, and then turning this function on and off completely. So if you can see the picture, it's now not getting affected. That on and off function, it goes across all the other columns here, which I'll show you in a sec. In terms of film types, you can just select all and then scroll through them here so you can visually see what they will look like before clicking them. Or you can refine your search a little bit further down to color negative or motion picture, etc. So say if we go motion picture, it'll just give us the motion picture ones. And then you can also choose from here, and you've got your push and pull up and down to stops. And double click to reset that. So just really simple, double click resets them, that turns it off. And we'll jump to the other side. So I should probably run across this menu first. So this one just gives us a little bit more space with the photo, just hiding that left column. The cogs here give you a little bit of options to change some settings. You can update your film profiles here, which you would do when you first launched Dehancer to make sure it's got the latest. That's your license info. This just allows you to have those tooltips come up when you hover over. I quite like that in case you want, you know, you forget what function is or something like that. The high resolution grain, you've got an option whether you want to tick that or not. If you've got multiple GPUs, you can choose from there, and that's your rendering preview settings. I'll close that. You've got a couple of other options here. Restore last used settings. That one restores all the settings to defaults, and then your redo, undo, and redo. This one here gives you a one-to-one preview, so it'll zoom in to a one-to-one and zoom out. You can also do that by double-clicking on the screen, so very easy there. That turns the whole setup on and off, so everything that you've chosen Dehancer is off or on with one click of a button. Clicking OK would save the changes and return you back into Lightroom with the new file. Cancel would cancel this altogether, also return you to Lightroom. We'll just pop that menu back up so we can see it. And then down the side here, we've got all the different options for what we can do with Dehancer, as well, obviously, as the film profile was on the left there. And the way Dehancer advises us to use this is sort of a step-by-step procedure. So you would start with this source window, and just make sure your color temperature, your tint, and any diffringing issues are sorted out in the beginning. And then you would move on to your film profiles. So for me, in the source side of things, I think everything looks more or less okay. So we would now move over to the picture profiles. And of course, you don't have to use these. You can just use other options in here, like, you know, grain or whatever. But we'll go with a film profile because I think it looks good. I think I'll go with Kodak Vision 3 250D. And then once you've done the source and the film profile, you jump into expand. Just make sure that the whole dynamic range, etc., is all good. I'll just move these up and down so you can see the sort of effects that it can have. And again, with the black point, so you can choose your sort of contrast level in here, and how much of the image, how bright you want it, and how much contrast. There's also a color mode here. If you choose Luma, these settings will only affect the brightness, not the color or the saturation. So if I choose, you'll just see, if I say I did the white, you can see that the colors are changing. Whereas if I just do Luma, it's just the brightness that's changing. And I'll put that back to normal, put that up a little bit, that one down a little bit. And then we move on to print. That's already ticked. And the recommendations for printing sort of depend on the film that you pick. So Dehancer recommends if you're in here and you're picking a color positive film, it would be advisable to use the linear profile in that case. If you're doing a motion picture stock, you would pick the Kodak 2383 for the printing in here. And if you're doing a color negative film, you would use the Kodak Endura film. So we're doing a motion picture. So in here, I will pick the Kodak 2383. and you can see that changes a little bit. You can increase your tonal contrast and your color density in here, as well as your exposure, and just refine to however you want the picture to look. You've also got an analog limiter here, if you want to use that. And after using the print module, Dehancer recommends that you go back to that expand and just make sure that all the settings that you had here are still as you want them to look, or you might want to just refine a little bit there as well. So you can come back to this window and keep working on it, because as you use some of these functions, some of those black points and white points will change. Next is your color head. So you've got, you can use this individually to change the colors, and there's quite a leeway each way. I'm obviously exaggerating there just to show you. Or you can gang them together, and if you just press gang, they will slide as one. And double click that to reset. And you've also got your preserve exposure and impact settings. And then we move on to the additional effects, which is sort of your creative side of this Dehancer plugin. You've got film grain, which I'll turn these on in a second. You've got halation, bloom, and vignette. And all of these I really like. So I use almost all of them together. Sometimes I will turn one off, but generally I switch most of them on. So we'll turn film grain on, and you can see the picture changing there. I might just push that there so we can see a little bit more. So you've got a lot of settings here for film grain, and film grain is very special in Dehancer because normally software just overlays the film grain on top of the image, which doesn't make it look very realistic, whereas Dehancer actually reconstructs the whole shot using special software algorithms and bakes the grain sort of into the image, so you're getting not an overlay but the actual whole image is reconstructed with the grain in it, making it look very natural and very film-like, the closest to analog that I've found. And here you've got, your different size. You can change a lot of things. I'll just max these out a little bit so you can see how far you can push it. You've got your amount, which, there's quite a lot you can turn here. You've got your resolution, and then you can tell it, I'll just reset those so it's a little bit more natural. You've got your shadows, midtones, and highlights, so where the grain affects. And you've got your color as well here. So also you've got film type and mode. Film type, you've got negative and positive. So negative grain is more pronounced in the highlights, and the image has a slightly higher micro contrast, which is more evident in negative film. And for the positive grain, it's more like a classic look. Softer grain, which is less pronounced in the highlights, and is more typical of positive film in real life. And you've also got the mode option here for analog and digital. So analog requires a little bit more processing power, but the result will be more lifelike. And the digital one is more of a faster performance grain, and can be used for more like a low resolution projects or draft rendering. So I normally leave mine on analog. I just think it looks nicer. And moving down to halation and bloom, I probably should show you these on a different picture, but we'll just click them on here. I'll show you on a more of a night photo because you can see the effects a little bit more. So halation is a visual effect that appears when you shoot with film, and it's most visible as like a reddish orangey halo, usually on contrasting borders and areas like bright light sources. Also in night scenes you can see it around lights, in day scenes sometimes where the backlight is, and on reflective surfaces like metal, you can see it around the edges as well. And you can see it a lot in human complexion. I don't have a picture here, but naturally on film you would see it in that as well. So you've got a lot of options here again. Each of these sections is just loaded with, different combinations that you can zero into. So we've got the source limiter, You've got your background gain, smoothness, local diffusion. So the higher you push this, the larger the radius of the halos. So you can see them really becoming evident here. If I just do a 1-to-1, you can see the halos around the edges there if we push that back. So obviously I'm exaggerating here just so that you can see sort of the effect that you can have. And you've got your amplify here. So you've got a lot of different controls to make this effect look the way you want it and to make it as natural as possible. You've also got a hue setting here so that you can match the scene a little bit more. And the hue just pushes that color. If I go here and amplify, it just changes that color from more the reds you can see down here to, if I push it to the other side, more of a yellowy glow. So you've got a little bit of option there. It's hard to how you want the glow to look. I quite like it in the middle. The blue comp here is also a nice addition. If you've got a cool background, it can sort of diminish the effect of the halation a little bit. So this allows you to compensate and counterbalance that effect a little bit. And you've got your impact there. That's sort of like your opacity layer in other software where you can turn it on or turn it off. So it's sort of like your level of how much of this you want, of the look of this particular look, like the halation. And moving down to bloom, similar thing. Bloom and halation normally appear together in film, so I usually have these both clicked. And you can see that it just adds that glow if I turn that off and turn that back on. Obviously, we're exaggerated here, like I said, just so that you can see the effects, but you would normally tone these right down just to give it that subtle look. And similar options here with amplifying details, diffusion, that sort of thing. I won't run through all of it, and you've got your impact setting there as well, so you can turn it right up or off. And one other thing I just zoomed back out of that one, double clicking. Wow, we're really glowing here. Might just turn the halation off. One of the things that I didn't cover was just this masking. I might go back to it just here actually. With this mask, if you click mask mode, and a few of those, you probably saw it in the bloom there as well. If you click the mask mode, it just allows you to see which part of the image is being affected by that halation. So as you can see, when I put impact down, it'll be completely gone, and then you can dial that in a little bit. So just sometimes it's hard to see on the image exactly where you're affecting it, and that's just one way of doing it, by hitting that mask. So there we go. I should probably turn these down a little bit so it looks a bit more natural. Probably needs a little bit more dialing in. I won't waste time now, but you get the idea of how to use that. Bloom we've looked at, and then you've got your vignette. Now, one thing to mention about the vignette is that even though it's right at the bottom here, it is something that you may want to adjust and should adjust right towards the beginning of your chain of adjustments. So if you're going to use vignette, just keep that in mind. And the reason is that it affects the exposure, and it usually also increases contrast. So you just need to keep that in mind, that you may need to go back up the top and adjust things if you're doing this last. But I would do this towards the beginning of your chain. And I will just make this, I'll drop down the exposure, but I'll also drop this feather. And then you'll be able to actually see the circle of vignette that's going to be affecting the image. And here you can change your aspect ratio, so you can make it long or high. And it's very easy to see once the feather's off. And then you can get your size dialed in as to how you want it. And then once you've got all that and your exposure, you can just turn that feather up and it'll just blend it into the image, and then on and off just to see how it's affecting it. So that's one little trick that I use, just so that I can see exactly what the vignette will look like, and then I just pop that feather up. And that brings us sort of to the end of the tour. As you can see, there's a lot to do here. I will now press OK, and what I'll do actually is just make this a significant change here so that we can see that there was a difference. Let's just move that towards cyan, and I'll just press OK, and we'll be returned back to Lightroom, and you'll see that we've got two images here now. We've got the original one and the one that I just made the significant change so that you can clearly see that it's come back in. And this is with the Dehancer adjustments. And I did want to show you that halation, so I'll just reopen this one. Normally we would do all our settings here. I will just put that down to 1 and our contrast down to 40. And our blacks up to 60. Now you could set this as a preset and just highlight all your images here, just give that slight adjustment and then they can all go through to Dehancer. I've got the highlights down a little bit because I blew that picture out, but right click now and edit in Dehancer. Oh, I've just noticed I didn't change that to standard, so I'll do that as well. Right click, edit in Dehancer. Edit and just go down to that halation and I'll just pick a profile, so we'll open that and maybe this time we'll do a color negative and how about agfa, and we'll go over to our source, which I should have done first, but I knew that was pretty much okay. Actually, let's just double check the defringing. Yep, double click. Actually, I will double click that so that you can see that's not very straight. But anyway, we'll continue. Film profile, expand points. Down to print. So this time I will be picking the Endura paper because we're doing the negative film. And we'll go down to color head, I'll leave as is. Film grain, we'll do a little bit of film grain, maybe a little bit less. And we'll move down to halation. And you can see those lights now being affected. I'll just turn that off. So it's a little bit more prominent and easy to see in the halation. And I'll also put the bloom on so you'll see that effect as well. And I'll just double click so we can see. So without bloom and with, you can just see it just gives that little glowing effect as well as the halation. And if we turn off our preview here, I might also just add vignette as well. And if we turn off our preview and back on again, you can see that there's a nice little glow to the lights and it's got that sort of much more of a film look than it did at the beginning, where it's quite digital and everything is very, you know, clean and perfect, to sort of a more grainy, retro-y image that looks like film. So yeah, you've got a lot of different options here. I've just shown you a couple. I might wrap up the video now. Just click OK to return to Lightroom, and we've got the two images there. So our original and our altered one. And what I'll do now is just finish up the video, put a little bit of music on, and I'll show you just some pictures that I've edited so that you can see the different effects and how they look and the different film stocks. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll leave all the links below, as I said, and Dehancer's got a great website, dehancer.com, so you can visit there, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for listening and watching, and have a great day. Bye.